Hey everyone, Savage Worlds is really good at tactical combat. I mean, movement's even measured in inches, ranges in inches. Everything really revolves around having a map, having your characters move on that map, and using that to describe the environment. However, Savage Worlds can be used very effectively for theater of the mind. So let's talk about how we can do that today. Savage Worlds, one of the best games today. Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We'd love your support, comments, feedback. I don't normally do a pitch for support, but I missed a couple of the recent Savage Worlds Kickstarters because just couldn't justify that cost. So it'd be great if we had some support so that we could purchase some of those. That way we can bring them to the channel or read them, understand them. I've recently did a video on some cool edges, and some of those edges came from things that I kickstarted and that I had a chance to read. So if you can help, you can help. If you can't, well, that's fine too. Anyway, again, look at the bubbles, do stuff. So let's talk about what we wanted to talk about today, and I hope that people put in the comments how they do theater in their mind and some of their tips and tricks. But I want to talk a little bit about theater in the mind with Savage Worlds. I haven't invented any of these concepts. Most of this kind of suggestions or how to do things with respect to theater in mind in general have come from a lot of the game masters that I've watched that I enjoy. For example, Sly Flourish, the Lazy DM, has a lot of good information that he's talked about in some of his podcasts. So I'll just put that Savage World spin on it, but otherwise we'll talk about things that others have talked about in the past. So first thing is, why would we do theater of the mind? Well, I mean, the brain is a powerful tool. It's going to be so much more engaged in coming up with its own, way the descriptions are much greater than you're ever going to have in your map. No matter how good the map is made, and there's really a lot of cool maps out there, it's never going to have as much things on it that your brain's going to understand and come up with. Now, of course, everybody's going to have a different picture in their mind, but in the end, it's so much richer in your own mind of what you're doing. So I'll stop beating that point. Another thing for me, it's quicker prep. I'm not looking for a map. I'm not setting up the map. I'm not, trying to get an asset, because if there's something like in my bar scene, there's supposed to be a barrel and there's no barrel in the map that I found. Okay, now I need to find a barrel and set a barrel on there so the players know there's a barrel, because the barrel is an important part of the reason they're there, because they've heard there's a secret compartment in the barrel, whatever. But now I have to do all that kind of prep using the map. Theater of your mind, you don't have to, because you're just going to describe it. You're just going to capture in your notes what's the key elements, where things are kind of practically, because you will have to describe that. But in the end, you don't have to go through all the details, find the map or draw the map or whatever, get the tokens, get the whatever for the monsters. So easier, I think, to prep, and it's a little quicker. Something that it also does is it gives players more options. And what I mean by options is, you may think, well, I've got a map and I can decide where to go. Theater in the mind, I may not have as much choice to say, well, I move 3 inches this way and then 3 inches that way. And, I can tactically move things around. Well, I don't mean that. I mean, you're in a bar, for example, and you want to do a test on somebody. And so you're going to say, hey, I want to throw a bottle. If you've got a map, and the players are looking at the map, they may self hold back and look and say, oh, I don't see any bottles on the bar that's in the map, so there must not be any bottles. Versus, hey, Game Master, I want to throw a bottle as part of my test. Well, of course, it's a bar. There's bottles on the bar. Yeah, you can grab one, no problem. Or they could quickly spend a penny if it's more detailed narrative control to be able to get something done. So it really gives, I think, the players more options in what they're going to do, because they're using their imagination to get it done. So that's kind of the benefits. And plus, if you're using a virtual tabletop, or you don't want to use a virtual tabletop, Theater of Mind helps you not have to do all that work, or you could just use Discord then, because you don't even need a VTT, right? So how do we do that? So the first thing is, obviously, your players have to trust you. The players have to know, as a game master, you're not going to do any gotchas. So, like, for example, in our bar scene, I'm a player and the GM describes the environment and the player goes, okay, well, I'm going to attack the orc behind the bar. And the game master goes, oh, but he's got cover. And the player goes, well, wait a second. If I knew he had cover, I wouldn't have moved in this way. I would have jumped over the bar and then attacked him as opposed to what I was going to do. And it's only because a normal game master is going to say, oh, that's fine. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. But if the game master is kind of using that as gotchas to protect his minions or make it harder for the players to do stuff, it's going to be really hard to do theater of the mind. The players have to trust that you're going to do what's best for them and best for this scenario and not make it too difficult for them. And give them the benefit of the doubt when they're using their edges. Like, don't say, oh yeah, this thing snuck up behind you, so you didn't get to do, use whatever. Well, maybe they didn't. So, kind of along with that is then describe the environment in a way they can interact with it. On a map, it's obvious how there's some things there, but let them know the lay of the land. I mentioned that there's the bar, there's a bar here, you're behind a table, you're within a couple feet of the bar, you could easily get to it. The other orc is to your left, just around by another table, and the player can start saying, okay, well, there's two tables between me. Should I flip the table up and turn it into cover? What should I do? But you've described the environment very richly. Now, if this barrel I mentioned is more important than anything else, you definitely want to describe where that is, what's going on there, so the players understand what's going on. Now, again, I'm not doing the greatest example, but really describing the environment so that they can picture it in their mind is very important because they don't have the map that just shows how things are laid out. So their creativity. The flip side is you've got to give them enough information. So, for example, one of the things in Savage Worlds are area of effect weapons. And in the book, they even talk about, pull it up on my sheet here, they talk about using templates without miniatures. So if you got a small template that's 4 yards in diameter, it might affect 2 creatures. Medium, it might affect 3 targets. Now, that's not necessarily true because if the targets aren't next to each other, but that is something that you building this description out in their mind's eye will give them an idea. If you say, oh, there's 3 orcs around this table and they're standing up to attack you, well, yeah, something with a small blast template is going to get them. But if the players didn't know that they are all together and you just said, hey, there's 3 orcs, they may not be able to come up with the plan they want to do. So again, Savage Worlds defines some things that help you with AoE with respect to theater of the mind. So take advantage of that. So again, if, like, for example, a wizard is behind a bunch of fighters, if somebody's coming through to try to get the wizard, obviously, you should think about, well, the players are setting themselves up so that people have to come through and they're going to get a free attack. Don't think, oh, you're all bunched up over here, and so somebody can come around very easily. Give the players the benefit of the doubt. Same thing for if multiple players are planning on attacking the same thing in melee. Yeah, chances are they got gang up bonus. They're not going to not get that. If something's come and is going to attack them, obviously they're going to get their first strike. So make sure that you understand how the edges could play into not having the exact grid coordinates. Another thing is encourage interesting action. So theater in the mind, rule of cool can be so easy to do versus a map, because map, they're worried about moving 3 inches, then moving another 3 inches. Well, if I run, it's a D6. What am I? And I think they forget about tests and they forget about the kind of cool things they can do because they're too busy looking at the map. So encourage interesting actions. Encourage the rule of cool coming up. So let's think about what I mentioned is a player. So let's think about the thing I just mentioned. Players by the bar, he wants to do a test. Well, what's the cool thing? Well, he's going to throw a bottle, or he's going to flip the table and or he's going to throw a chair. He's going to do something interesting and encourage that and make that work to their advantage. If you throw a chair, that's pretty big. I might give you a bonus on, your tests or something along those lines, versus it's static on a map. You know, he's walking around the chairs. He may not even think that that's something he can do. So great chance for Rule It Cool. Encourage interesting actions because there is no map to force your thinking. Each round of combat, so as we're doing combat and we have ranges, that's always the big thing people think about is like, well, what about ranges? Because I know in Savage Worlds, the ranges are in inches. Am I there? I look at it this way. Most battle maps, at least the ones that I use, they tend to start people off kind of in mid-range. So if you look at some range weapons, a lot of them are 12, 10, 15. You've got, you know, guns that might be greater than that. But generally, the maps that you get start people off in kind of a medium range. So that's where I would normally start. It's like you're in medium range unless it makes a lot of sense that players are at long range and they can take advantage of that. Like a sniper doesn't even necessarily need to get on the map. He might be staying off the map at long range and trying to do some attacks that way. So I kind of think keep it starting in the middle, kind of medium. And, you know, think about things as there's medium range or long range, short range, and then melee. So I also consider then, if you look at that range, I talked about 12, 10, 15, there's 24, you know, stuff like that. Running really can get you from one to another. And so if you think of running as 6+6 as opposed to 6+1d6, if you think about 6+6, players can move 12 in a round if they're moving fast, if they're running. And of course, we've got all those edges that help make people faster, and you should keep in mind those would let them move from one range increment to another faster. So in this case, that 12, that should get a player from that medium range starting zone into close to either being in short range for range weapons, or if they start, depending on how you want them to start them out on the map, now they're going to be in melee range after one round of movement. If they're a little farther out, then you might say, hey, there's 2 rounds of movement, or if the players are going to move slowly and not run, you might change how long, the number of rounds, but it's really not, we're measuring it precisely, so it's going to take you 3 rounds and 3 movement to get there. It's more, we're going from middle range to short range or melee to melee range. And then it's very easy to do that. And because the weapons ranges support that in kind of their baseline, it's, you know, players start in medium range with their weapons, unless there's a specific reason. And then as they move forward, they would get into short range with their weapons. Obviously, you're describing the lay of the land, so they know where there's cover. So in the bar, they can flip the table and hide behind it. They can jump over the bar. There may be some barrels or some other things that they can use. You want to describe that so as they're moving from one range to another, they're taking advantage of what's in the environment. So that's kind of the key. One last thing I do that is pseudo theater to mine. What I like to do is have overview maps, literally 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that I can sit on the table that give a lay of the land, and players can get a feel for what is there without having to actually put minis on the map or anything like that. So for example, in a game that I play at conventions a lot called the Helix Nebula Situation, and that's actually available on Drive-Thru-RPG as one of the swag products, you know, from the Pinnacle side. The map I put out is something like you'd find, like if you were on a spaceship and you went up to a console that's on the thing, you could push a button and you could see the layout of the ship. So I dropped that layout right on the ground. It gives them all the kind of areas, and it gives them kind of a relative size. But when they enter a room, there's no, oh, by the way, you're at the door, this guy is 6 away from you, you can get there, or there's this. It's literally, you've entered the sick bay, you're starting off pretty much in short range. What do you want to do? Oh, is there a doctor's bed? Well, my fault for not describing that, because at the beginning, I talked about you need to describe the environment. Oh, there's a couple of doctor beds, there's a metal table that's got surgical instruments on, the creatures are back behind a curtain, coming through one of those privacy curtains. Now we start getting someplace. So that's kind of how I think about theater of mind and how I've run it with combat in the past. Again, none of these are my ideas. Basically get them from others and have taken advantage of them in my game. So the experience has been great. It really helps out when there's combat that you're planning. You don't have a lot of time to prepare, and it doesn't make sense to get super tactical. Maybe, you know, your boss battles, that's a big scene. You want to make sure it gets tactical. You want to build it out. But for example, I have a game right now where the players are going to run into Trents. And am I going to line all that up? It's a forest. They're in the forest. So it's really, there's a lot of cover. There's that, I can describe that. And these creatures can come into melee range, or they can try to attack from a short range as they get closer, because long range, there's trees in the way. I can just describe that, and we can get through that without having to go too tactical and understand all the nuances, because that's not the key thing. The key thing is hopefully they don't get into combat, or if they do, they figure out that these guys aren't bad. And so the Trents have something that they want the players to do, or they'll have something for the players to do. That's more important. That small combat, and maybe you can do that as a quick encounter too, but if you're not doing that and it doesn't make sense for that, theater of mind is a great way of doing it. So a lot of rambling there, but hopefully you got something out of it. Again, didn't invent it. But I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Look forward to your support, email, and hey, throw comments down there on how you run theater of mind and some of your cool techniques, because then we can all learn together. So we'll catch you later. Savage World, one of the best games today. Savage World, Benny and Cam's Smile Play.